Summertime, we take a trip where they go down to the sea in ships, singing, "That's where Grandma and Grandpa live." When I was a child, summers by the sea, lazy beach, hazy days, a cardinal in the garden. The sea breeze would rustle the leaves of the gnarled and twisted trees, blow your hair out of place, make you feel free. And down at the shipyard park, you can still hear the old folks talk of whaling ships and a widow's walks. When I was a child, summers by the sea, lazy beach, hazy days, a cardinal in the garden. A child's mind could always find ways to pass the summertime, collecting shells, a penny, nickel, a dime. Saturday night, take a walk on the rocks while the band played by the dock, feeling sorry for those the land had locked. When I was a child, summers by the sea, lazy beach, hazy days, a cardinal in the garden. When the day comes I die, lay me down where the seagulls fly, place a rest till the end of time, and look for another cardinal in the garden.
just to come and hold me, to wrap up all the answers neatly, telling me it's gonna be alright. So I wrote myself a record full of songs about the fight, but it turns out all the answers are laying in the lonely nights. So I wandered through the valley. I stood beneath an open sky, just looking for somebody to lead me through the lonely nights. But it turns out all the answers were hiding deep beneath my bones. And it turns out writing love songs helped me find my way back home. I'm still looking for somebody to hold on to me just right. But it turns out all the love songs were holding on to me too tight. Turns out all the answers are sitting right here on my tongue. And it turns out all the answers prove I've only just begun.
Good morning. I'm the Reverend Tony Lorenzen, the minister at the Mattatuck Unitarian Universalist Society and the Unitarian Universalist Church in Meriden. It's good to have you with us this morning for our service Back to School. I know that some of you may be going back to school virtually, some may be in person, some may be going back to school in some combination of both of those, but however it's working out for you and your family, we want to invite you into joining us for this service this morning and taking a look at what education means to us. And we're going to do a blessing of our students and of our teachers and others who work in the field of education. Being Unitarian Universalists, we begin our service by lighting the symbol of our faith, the flaming chalice. I invite you to join me in saying the words of the chalice lighting, which should be on your screen. This flame invites us into fellowship, inspires our spirit, and ignites in us a passion for environmental justice, economic justice, and racial justice. Let's enter into this celebration together. Traditionally, during this service, as we start up a school year and a church program year, we would do a blessing of the backpacks, sending children back off to school with a blessing of their backpack that they used to bring things back and forth from school to home, and maybe give them something to attach to that backpack. This year, due to COVID, we're going to do a blessing of learners and students, as well as teachers and other people who work in the field of education. And we'll be sending a copy of these out to the children in our families and to all our educators and others who work in education. And if you know a child or someone who works in the field of education as a teacher, administrator, counselor, nurse, and you think they would like one of these, just send us an email at candles@uumeriden.org and we will get one out to them as well. Spirit of life and love, dwell in the hearts of these young people who are students and learners. They are always present and ready to receive our blessings, and they do so this morning as they commit themselves to learning for another academic year. We give our love and blessing to each and every one of them. We bless them in this ritual of love and support. For all of you students, dear ones, whether you study at home or at school or in a library or in front of a computer, do so with all of our love. If something is difficult or confusing, know we're proud of you. May you speak up for those who are not seen and heard. Tuck UU Society and the UU Church in Meriden are made stronger when you share with us what you are learning. Tell us what excites you and what causes you trouble, and we will share in your joys and your sadnesses. We bless you and your learning journey. May you always feel at home in Unitarian Universalism and as part of our communities that value learning, knowledge, truth, beauty, art, and science. But most of all, know you are loved and wonderful and special just as you are. This morning, we also offer blessings to our teachers and administrators and everyone who works in the field of education, tutors and counselors and nurses and coaches. We embrace your call to teaching and education. We see this work as an important and vital ministry, a service to others grounded in the love of learning and desire to help others maximize their human potential. We see you as an example of what love looks like in action. For education is a ministry not only of learning, but of justice. Your ministry as educators provides for all of us an example of how to practice our Unitarian Universalist faith and live an undivided life, a life where what we believe in and value and what we do in the world cohere and weave in and out together in a vibrant dance. As you minister to others, we offer you our support and encouragement. May our congregations and our Unitarian Universalist tradition be a source of inspiration, respite, renewal, encouragement, and hope as you live out your calling. For all these blessings, in the name of everything that is glorious and good, in the spirit of truth and knowledge, and with so much love, we say amen. An excerpt from The Plague by Albert Camus. The reserves of emotion pent up during those many months when for everybody the flame of life burned low were being recklessly squandered to celebrate this, the red letter day of their survival. Tomorrow real life would begin again with its restrictions. But for the moment, people in very different walks of life were rubbing shoulders, fraternizing. The leveling out that death's imminence had failed in practice to accomplish was realized at last, for a few gay hours, in the rapture of escape. Not easy right now. I've just come back from a month of vacation, which I was incredibly grateful to have. And I come back in, the dog days of summer. The summer's starting to get really warm. People are looking forward once again to the end of the summer and the change of seasons, and the rhythms of life that fall in line with that include a return to school and a return to church for a new program year. And all of that is feeling very disrupted right now. Summer's not really feeling the same. And as we turn to go back to church and school, that certainly isn't feeling the same. There's a lot of attendance stress. And I'm noticing that lots of people are kind of up to here with pandemic. We're tired, we're down, energy levels are low, we're kind of sick of the sickness. School is ready to begin, and around the country there's going to be a variety of ways that school will operate this year. Some will be entirely online. Some will be in person. Some will try a combination of both. And I have a feeling that all of those will probably change as the school year goes on. We crave connection. We need each other. We are social beings. And yet, being together in close proximity physically is not only dangerous, it can still be deadly. But most of us, if not all of us, have had it with social distancing and the isolation it's bringing on. We're sick of the disruption and the disconnection and the not being together. We're starving of skin hunger and shaking with the DTs of hug withdrawal. Our bodies may have remained healthy, but emotionally a lot of us are really struggling at times lately. This is really getting to us. So, how do we overcome it? One of the things we're going to be doing is going back to church. We're going to start developing ways we can be together, respecting the protocols of social distancing, with some outside services and maybe some other outside gatherings respecting social distance protocols. I'd like to encourage you to practice some visiting with each other using social distance protocols. Meeting in the backyard, in the driveway, at an outdoor cafe that's not crowded for a cup of coffee together. Be as safe as you can and follow your guidelines, but don't let the pandemic dictate to you isolation. It may not be the kind of contact we want, but we can still be relatively safe and be together a little bit. And we're going to start working on guidelines for how that might happen with us, even though it's still too dangerous to go back inside the church buildings for services and large gatherings. I want to encourage you all, as I wrote in the newsletter this week, to take part in what we are doing at church. There is a lot to be involved in. Learn to use Zoom and video conferencing if you haven't. Join a small group. Join a team or a committee working on social justice or worship or education or you the vote or environmental justice. If Moose isn't doing something, Meriden is. If Meriden isn't, Moose is. There's a lot to do together in this partnership, offering a lot of opportunities. I can use some help visiting people. I'm going to resume being the mobile minister and the roving reverend once again, and going to visit folks. Bring my own chair, bring my mask, sit 6 feet away from you, and let's chat. I think the worst thing we can do right now is to ruminate on the isolation and to allow ourselves to experience the worst of that type of situation. This summer I started playing tennis again. Great sport for social distancing. You're at opposite ends of a court. One opponent I played against this summer suggested we use our own balls. I served the can of balls I brought, he served the can of balls he brought, and we used our rackets and ways to not touch the other balls with our hand. It was great, We got some real good exercise and we were able to play a sport we enjoyed. I started gardening again seriously this summer. It's been wonderful. Had a little rough start, but things are going great now. We are meeting with friends. I went up and met with my brother, sat outside with him and my sister-in-law and my nephew, sat outside with my mom. We are sitting outside with friends right now for dinner about once a week, 6-8 feet apart, only 4 or 6 of us. And it really helps. We can take control of the situation we find ourselves in. Make yourself a phone list. Call 3 people who mean something to you every week. Get involved with making phone calls or sending postcards as the election comes around. There's a lot for us to be involved with. There will be more adult education and spiritual practice opportunities this year at church. Get engaged in one of those. I know, as I wrote in the newsletter this week, that just being involved with something is not a cure for depression, is not going to magically make things better. But it actually really is true that being involved with others and helping others always does help somewhat. Excerpts from The Freedom of Unschooling, Raising Liberated Black Children Without the Restrictions of School by Akilah S. Richards. Unschooling is essentially a curiosity-led approach to learning, devoid of testing and predefined curricula. It leaves the exploration and implementation of knowledge to children instead of relying on the passing of information from adults and books based on what is believed by adults to be necessary learning. This approach has been an invaluable resource for our family as we raise children, travel the world, and continue to turn our interests into income. As parents, we work towards a shared goal of raising women who are comfortable in their skin, versed in the skill of confident autonomy, and experienced in how to mine and utilize information in the digital age. We unschool because having our lives revolve around our children sitting in a building for 6 hours per day stopped making sense for our interests and needs as a family. We are not anti-school, we are pro-learning. And for our daughters, school put unnecessary boundaries and segmented blocks of time around their ability to explore and process the information they gathered. Also, school can create a dangerous reliance on external validation, teachers' approval, social acceptance, which we find particularly dangerous for Black children, as most of the teachers in our daughter's school did not look like our daughters, nor did they share our family's cultural and spiritual values. There are systems and structures all around us, and some may seem inviting or even unavoidable. But if you can manage to find or facilitate a community of people, whether local or virtual, who are doing the work of deliberate life design and of defining and creating liberation based on their own definitions of it, then start here. Today, our measure of success ignores GPA's degrees in the American dream. Instead, we put focus on confident autonomy, autodidactic learning, strong discernment skills, and happy people who are willing to approach their own ideas of liberation and joy from an action-based space. We don't want our daughters hoping for change. We are equipping them with the tools to create it. I first encountered the concept of unschooling, which is different from homeschooling, about 20 years ago when I met a friend who was unschooling his two children, one son and one daughter. They are both grown up now, and one's a college graduate and the other just graduated. They're both college graduates now. So their unschooling did not stop them from achieving what they wanted to achieve in higher education. But I was fascinated by what they were doing. They would be involved with a local theater group for children. They would take music lessons. They would take classes at the Harvard Extension School. They really created their own way to learn and followed their passions and developed interests and skills that they still pursue to this day. Now, my friend and his family were well off. They had their share of privilege. He was a lawyer, and the money was decent, and they lived in a nice house, and they had working situations where, because he was a lawyer, his wife did not have to work full-time herself, even though she did work, and there was some flexibility in their scheduling, and they put a lot into making sure that the unschooling could happen at a really good pace and in a creative and sustainable way for their kids and their family. Now, not everyone can facilitate that type of unschooling experience for their children. But when I was teaching high school, I taught in a Catholic high school, I took one of my classes one year and decided to see if we could unschool in school. And I basically told the students that most of the year for our course in ethics this year was going to be them learning whatever they wanted. Some people took it as a joke. A few people just did their homework for other classes. But one young lady wrote a novel. One young man knew he was going to be turning 18 by the end of the school year, studied for and obtained his real estate agent license in Massachusetts. A couple guys who loved sports wanted to learn all about football, and although it started off being a bit of a laugh, as I pressed them to really follow this and really actually do some learning, they got themselves invited to practice at Boston College, a Division I NCAA football program. And they learned a lot about football. And it was a lot more work and took a lot more time and effort than I think they were expecting when they started the project. It was a fascinating exploration of what any young person, given the time and encouragement and help with resources, can learn. We're all learners. We are lifelong learners. Human beings love to learn. Now, I know some of you will be going back to school with a lot of anxiety. I know there's teachers out there that are going back to school with a lot of anxiety. There's no perfect way for doing this. We have run into a situation that I think the pandemic is making clear, that in our culture right now, education is really finding it difficult to transition to what's next. And by that what's next, what comes after the way we've always done it? Most of the way we still do school, classrooms with the teacher at the front, even though developments have been made, a lot of it is still based on the schoolhouse we had in an agricultural society hundreds of years ago. Why do we go to school in the fall and stop in the spring? Because we need to work in the farms and the fields. That's not true anymore. Education didn't adapt terribly well to the industrial age, except to think it could pattern schools one after the other, kind of like a factory turned out a product. And over the last couple of decades, education has been going through a slow revolution of its own, understanding different learning styles, understanding the different needs different students have, understanding that art and science are equal parts of a great education. And school itself as an institution is changing. In the same ways we're having to figure out what church will be like going forward, we're now facing the reality of finding out what education will be like going forward. Martin Luther King once said that the most segregated hour in America is 11 a.m. on Sunday morning. was probably true, might still be true. But another great block of segregated time in our culture is the school day. It is definitely a characteristic and an example of white supremacy culture that we still insist on funding schools across the country by local property taxes, which means those who live in wealthy, affluent communities of privilege have great schools, and those who don't. And we know that in our culture, race is connected to income inequality. So we're starting to learn once again about how we have to navigate education differently going forward. I've been a teacher. I know we have a lot of people in education connected to our congregations, and I think you are heroes. Teachers are never valued enough in our culture. What education might look like going forward, we're still going to need teachers and we're still going to need schools. They will be different and they will function differently. And I think we're getting a small taste of that as we go back. So I encourage everybody to make the best of whatever educational situation you find yourselves in, and know that as a community, we as Unitarian Universalists are supportive of your education and want you to succeed. Stupidity is more dangerous than malice. Thoughts from Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Stupidity is a more dangerous enemy of the good than malice. One may protest against evil. It can be exposed and, if need be, prevented by use of force. Evil always carries within itself the germ of its own subversion, and that it leaves behind in human beings at least a sense of unease. Against stupidity, we are defenseless. Neither protests nor the use of force accomplish anything here. Reasons fall on deaf ears. Facts that contradict one's prejudgment simply need not be believed. In such moments, the stupid person even becomes critical. And when facts are irrefutable, they are just pushed aside as inconsequential, as incidental. In all this, the stupid person, in contrast to the malicious one, is utterly self-satisfied, and, being easily irritated, becomes dangerous by going on the attack. For that reason, greater caution is called for when dealing with a stupid person than with a malicious one. Never again will we try to persuade the stupid person with reasons, for it is senseless and dangerous. As we start to go back to school, it's good to remember that one of the key parts of our Unitarian Universalist faith tradition is learning and education. We trust in the idea that revelation is not sealed, that there is always more to learn and unlearn, that all we need to know about the universe and spirituality and religion and ethics in this life we find ourselves in was not set down in one place at one time by one person in one book by one God. There's always more to learn, always more to discover. We trust in our practice of a free and yet responsible search for truth and meaning. You can't be a conspiracy theorist believer and be a Unitarian Universalist. We encourage research and exploration and debating ideas. It's part of the practice of our faith. We trust in the knowledge gained by science to save us from the idolatries not only of the spirit, but of the mind. Again, if people are telling you things that COVID is a hoax, well, our respect for science saves us from that idolatry. We trust in the words and deeds of prophetic people who have come before us, which challenge us to confront power and structures of evil with justice, compassion, and the transforming power of love. We find ourselves now in a world where ignorance is not only making this pandemic worse, it's making it so that more people are dying than need to, by preventing reality-based, science-based responses to the pandemic. Dietrich Bonhoeffer wrote, as the Nazis took power in Germany, that stupidity, ignorance, is more dangerous to the good than maliciousness and evil. That's a powerful statement. And yet what he said seems to ring true. People who are anti-vaccines and people who want to claim climate change or COVID as a hoax, who praise being willfully ignorant. These are dangerous people with dangerous ideas. And it's difficult to reason with anyone who is almost like living in a different reality. Bonhoeffer knew this in Germany during the rise of the Nazis, and we still see it in examples every day right now in our culture. As Unitarian Universalists, our devotion to the practice, the spiritual practice of learning and discussing and researching and exploring ideas of all kinds is part of what helps us survive and struggle through these times. And this is a struggle where we need to put into practice practices of our faith. One of those is learning and studying. Another is practicing democracy. There's an essay in this week's issue of the Christian Century that asks Christian readers, is protest or can't protest be a spiritual practice the way prayer, meditation, or Eucharist, or other things they are used to are a spiritual practice? And the answer is yes. We as Unitarian Universalists believe this, that not only is learning and study and knowledge and finding truth and discussing it a spiritual practice, so is protest and organizing and advocacy and working for justice. These are things we must do in order to be Unitarian Universalists. In some way, we take part in this. We find our way to practice that part of our faith that works for each of us. We are called to fight ignorance as well as evil. And over the next couple of months, our faith calls us to practice our involvement in democracy. We need to work to register people to vote, and we need to work to protect the integrity of this upcoming election. We're going to hear more about that next week when the entire service will be about you, the vote. So, as we return to school, as we return to church, let us promise to one another we will work together to overcome the pandemic situation. We will work together to make church work. We'll work together to help families make school work. This is a struggle, like the struggle for racial justice or environmental justice or economic justice. The pandemic is a struggle. And getting through a struggle requires intentional practice. Let's intentionally practice our faith. Let's intentionally do some learning that lights a fire inside us. Let's intentionally find ways to be in community together. Let's intentionally find ways to practice democracy. By taking up these practices, we will help ourselves move forward through this struggle against the pandemic and the isolation and the distancing that it creates for us. We can overcome that. As I said at the beginning of this, it's still true now. There is only one way through this, and it's together.
There is a love holding me. There is a love holding all that I love. There is a love holding all. I rest in
thoughts and prayers Richard Galt's daughter, April, who's dealing with a post-operative infection after emergency surgery on her back, and Richard's daughter, Alicia, who is home recovering from stomach surgery. Our thoughts are with them, and we hold them in our hearts as they recover. Nancy Burton's partner, Steve, will be having back surgery next week, and we hold both of them in our hearts this week. Eileen Resnick's son-in-law was diagnosed with lymphoma, and we hold her and her family also in our hearts this week. And on a note of celebration, Eileen Resnick turned 80 this week, so happy birthday, Eileen. Great and gracious truth, known by so many names, and by no name fully known. Sometimes the world makes no sense to us at all. All we've known has been tossed into the air, and with up and down having changed places, we don't know where it will all land. We don't know where we will land, because the world no longer seems to make sense sometimes. What we thought was true is called into question. What we knew to be safe no longer seems so. A spirit of life. It would be lovely if everything could get easily back to the way it was. Yet we know that the way things were wasn't as fair and just as we know the world should be. The comfort of some came at the cost of the discomfort of others, and that's not the world we dream about. That is not beloved community. That is not what we're working for. Spirit of hope and courage, we seek the tenacity to live into this time of challenge and change, and not take the easier path of running through or around it. Our faith is not an easy faith. This world is not an easy world. Our lives are not easy lives, even those lives with much privilege. This place between birth and death where we find ourselves is hard. Yet this is where life is. This is where growth is. This is where all things holy are. This is the only place where true wholeness can be found. Today, in this place, in this time, as we are together, we gather hopes and dreams, and we live into the hopes and dreams of those who have come before us. We commit ourselves to the hard things. We commit ourselves to being instruments of change in a world so much in need of it. We commit ourselves to affirm and promote the principles and vision of our faith. And may we also remember that none of us does this alone. For we are a community, and in that community, we can find all we need. In the name of all that is holy, and in all the holy names that have been uttered in prayer, and those holy names still awaiting our discovery, we say, blessed be, and amen.
Good morning. I'm Pinky Chilemi, a member of the Social Justice Coordinating Team here at Moose, and today is the fourth Sunday of the month. Here at Moose, the first and fourth Sundays of the month are Share the Plate Sundays. Half of the collection will go to the Social Justice Fund. Those funds are used to support many local causes and causes in the larger world. Our focus has been on food security, income equality, environmental justice, and LGBTQ support. We're hoping you could give as generously as you can. Our funds are starting to gear up and we need all the help we can so we can continue to give to these wonderful causes. Thank you so much in advance for your generosity.
I know times are tough right now for a lot of people financially, yet we still need your financial support to continue to bring you ministries such as this online service, and to help support our friends and members who are struggling financially, and to help people in our communities, such as in the Woodbury area with the food pantry, and in the Meriden area as our undocumented friends need help with everything from food to rent and other things, as they are not getting governmental assistance like many of the rest of us during this time. Be as generous as you possibly can, given your own circumstances. Know that the need is great and that our appreciation for whatever you can give is greater. Thank you so much. My friends, this morning's service has come to an end. We extinguish our chalice, but we know we carry that flame with us in our hearts always. As you go about your week this week, as you return to school, as you transition into a church program year and transition from summer to fall, may you take with you a love of learning. May the world spark your imagination. May your heart leap at things you wonder to understand. Go in peace, Holy One.